Hey everybody, this is Ryan from the Elite Wing again. I'm sitting here with Nick from Broken Contract.
Hi, how's it going?
Not bad. How's the con going so far?
Con's going good. It's quiet the first couple of days, but now things have really picked up and moved to a better spot. So
Awesome.
It's good.
Awesome. You're running a lot of demos?
Yeah.
Excellent. So tell me about Broken Contract. What made you decide to want to do your own game?
Okay. Well, essentially, I've always dabbled in game design. It's something that I've always been interested in. This is kind of a funny story, but all the way back in like 4th grade, when everybody else was, wanted to be firemen or what have you, I wanted to be a game designer because I was a huge D&D nerd starting in 3rd grade.
Okay.
And I fell in love with the idea of just, tinkering with things and making them your own. And so for years and years and years, I dabbled, did a lot of tournament organizing, worked in a lot of stores where I ran lots of events, and I always tinkered them and made them my own. And eventually, a few years ago, I ended up being brought on to Wreckage with Hyacinth Games.
Okay.
And I ended up working with them on Wreckage for about 6 months to a year, somewhere in that.
Okay.
Because originally they had brought me on to do some painting, and then I just ended up segueing into game design. And I realized that I still loved the idea of game design. Like all the way back when I was younger, I'd even submitted articles to Dragon Magazine and gotten stuff published, and so I was.
That's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yeah, so I was excited to get involved in that again, and so so I ended up splitting ways with Hyacinth Games and decided to strike out on my own.
Okay. So Broken Contract is in many ways almost a micro skirmish game. You can play it with just a few
Correct.
miniatures, or can you play it with larger numbers of miniatures?
You can scale up. The important thing at this stage is I actually wanted to stay with the whole micro skirmish idea. I wanted it to be a game where you only used a handful of models, and so honestly, I haven't tried scaling it fully up. I think that once you get to the point of about 24 models, so like 12 miles a side, it's going to start bogging.
Yeah, then you get into a full-on skirmish level.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So tell us what's different about Broken Contract.
What's different about it?
Yeah.
Well, I guess the key things are that I wanted to develop a game that could be played as a faction-based game where one person plays as the security officers or prods, and one person plays as the breakers, which are the revolting miners. And that's a good dynamic to have, but at the same time, there's something about a lot of times when you are into wargaming, you've got lots of friends that are involved, and there's not really a lot of good multiplayer war games.
Okay.
And so I wanted something that was playable by a group, and I wanted something that was easy enough that somebody who is transitioning from board games to war games would be able to do so.
Okay.
And so I came up with the idea of having a game where you could play up to 8 players, and each character or each person can control 1 to 3 characters, and be able to have an enjoyable wargaming experience. And so really the inspiration for the game came from TV shows like Firefly and Cowboy Bebop, because in Firefly and Cowboy Bebop, when you really study those TV shows, they're action-adventure stories.
Right.
And each character is individualized and have their own motivations. And so when you're playing multiplayer version of Broken Contract, each character can exhibit their personality traits. And so you can have the character who is the scumbag who turns on his friends do exactly that, and they have their own objectives in the scenario that they can carry out, and leave their friends to die if they want.
Okay, so how does that work with scenario-based play? I mean, do each player choose their own objective, or is that determined determined by the mission. And
it's determined by the mission.
Okay.
So, because ideally, the way the mission structure is it will give you a list of suggested characters, just like when you play D&D, they would have pre-generated characters.
Okay.
So you pick out those characters, or if you want to use your own characters, you use the character creation system, just super streamlined and simple, and just sub in your character for the character who has the devious motivations.
Okay, so how does that relate to having multiple players? I mean, what if the scenario doesn't have enough objectives for everybody who wants to play? You just choose a different scenario?
You could choose a different scenario, but ultimately how the expansion will go is that each scenario pack will then correspond with a group of new characters and new models.
Okay.
So you can keep carrying over your characters from previous, and you can add in these new characters. And the new characters will, the storyline will have multiple objectives, so that people that want to carry out these multiple objectives have those as an option, but they're optional.
Okay.
So.
Sounds pretty well thought out. How much playtesting have you done for this?
We've been playtesting for about a year now.
Okay.
But the one thing that every game really needs is external playtesters, and that's one of the things where I've been bogged down in my development process. Is I've had a dozen of my friends, and we've gotten together for a bunch of different playtesting sessions, and everything's gone well. They've made great suggestions. We added a couple of new actions, and there's a lot of little tweaks that have taken place. But there's something about having people that sit down and read your rules for clarity, and they try to break the game. And so I'm at the stage now where what I really would like to engage is start building a small community of people that are interested in the game, who are willing to do some additional play testing, look for clarity, so that then when I launch the rules as a actual purchasable rule book, all the brokenness that could creep in is pushed out.
Okay, so you're definitely looking to follow along with some of the other companies like Mantic and Weird that are doing public betas to develop the best product they can according to the community who's going to be their fans.
Exactly.
Okay, so what brought you to making that decision as opposed to just continuing on along with your friends and then finding an elite group of exclusive people?
Yeah, the trick is that, as I kind of mentioned, it's like when you're playing with your friends. I love my friends, but your friends they're kind of lazy about things. You end up telling them what the rules are, so they actually don't really sit down and study for clarity and things like that.
Right.
They just want to get together and hang out and game, and you have a very enjoyable experience. You get good feedback, but you don't really have that I guess that commitment to really break it down and tear it apart and rebuild it again. And I think that was what I got out of the experience, is that we had all of these great playtesting sessions, and I'm like, this is a good game. We're all having fun with it. We're all enjoying it. But I really, particularly after I had released an alpha version of the rules like 6 months ago, and one of the people that gave feedback actually was involved in editing for various companies.
Okay.
And so he sat down with it. He's like, this is what I do for my job, so I'm not going to, pick it apart in detail. He's like, but
he's not getting paid for that.
He's not getting paid for it. But he said to me, he's like, I think this is a really cool project. I want to, look it over and give you a couple of suggestions. And he actually gave me some great ideas on how to reorganize the rule book in order to get that better clarity.
Okay.
And that's something that my friends, because they already were familiar with the game, they didn't need that. And I think having somebody who is invested in building something
Right.
makes everything so much better.
And just fresh eyes all the time.
Exactly.
No, that's fantastic. Well, I'm really looking forward to seeing the rules. In the past few years, especially with things like Kickstarter, a lot of companies are coming out with their own games, and they're slowly building up communities. So what strategy are you in? Because you don't have like a published game yet.
Correct.
You've got your demo, you've got your beta, you're getting ready to do a Kickstarter, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But what are you planning on doing to build up community outside your local area, or are you going to focus in your local area and maybe a couple little pockets?
Yeah, well, essentially, in order to get that community investment, I think that pushing my playtester angle, because the Kickstarter that I'm about to launch, a large part of it is getting people to back the project because they want to do playtesting.
Right.
And they want to get involved in the project. And when people, I guess, get involved in that level, they become advocates.
Yeah.
And that is like the whole reason why, Games Workshop originally had their what are they called?
Outriders.
Outriders, thank you.
You're welcome.
Their Outrider program, and Privateer Press and
Press gangers, henchmen from Weird.
exactly. All of those things are essential, but the one thing about gamers is that you really need to get them invested first, and I feel that getting people involved in the playtesting process is a good way to get them invested, because now it's something that they've put some time into and they've invested in. But to keep that community involved, you actually have to keep them engaged.
Right.
And so having a blog that constantly is updated with content, new scenarios, having contest where having a contest where people can submit their own scenarios, their own characters, etc., and they are invested in building the world together with me. That is the angle that I'm shooting for.
Awesome. Well, I think that you're in a pretty good position, because I've been talking to some other people in some other interviews that we've been talking about how gamers are no longer truly loyal to just one game.
Yeah.
And back to even just a couple of years ago, if you were a 40K player, that is what you played.
Yep.
If you played War Machine, that is what you played to the exclusion of everything else.
Yep.
Fortunately, I think that's changed, and that's going to benefit you. But I would like to pick your brain. Why do you think that has changed?
Well, I think that I know from my own personal history, when I was a D&D player, I was a D&D player. I dabbled at the tail end of my D&D days. Around 93, 94, got involved in playing a little bit of Magic, and a group of my friends and I, we opened a store together, and we actually based the store around Magic the Gathering, and at that time it exploded, and so we had some additional income in order to expand the store, and we were like, oh, well, what are we going to add? Oh, we heard about this thing called Warhammer. And so we decided to, even back then it was a huge buy-in in order to bring Games Workshop.
It's always been pretty intimidating.
Yeah, and so we had like $10,000 that we had surplus from our Magic sales.
Oh wow!
And we were like, okay, we're gonna invest this whole hog into Games Workshop. And so we got the full line of Games Workshop product, and even me at that time, it's like, I'll play the game, and here, this was me as a store owner. I was like, I'm gonna play the game, but I am never going to care about the fluff. I don't care about the background. I don't want to get involved with it. I'm a D&D player. I'm invested in the world of Greyhawk. That was my thing.
Okay.
And once I eventually got involved in playing Warhammer, then it was a whole different ballgame, because then I started reading and I became invested in that.
You can't avoid it.
Exactly. But what happens is it takes up so much of your mind space that becomes your thing. It becomes part of you. The thing that's changed, though, is that Games Workshop, even I, was full on into the Kool-Aid. I worked for Games Workshop for 2.5 years. I eventually had kind of gotten to the point where, I've been involved with this for so long, I kind of want something else.
Yeah.
And so when I started to get involved in Wreckage, it was another thing where I became invested in that project. And I think that's the same thing that's happening to a lot of gamers, because a lot of the veterans, at least, have been involved in Games Workshop for a really long time. And the thing is that even though with 40K, they've expanded out into, they add new units every time there's a new edition and what have you, and it expands on what they have. There's also a thing of sameness. This is, the same setting for forever. And you can exist in that same setting forever, but sometimes eventually people are like, I want to try something new.